Norman Jean Macdonald was born on October 17, 1959, in Quebec, Canada. His parents, Fern and Percy Macdonald, raised him and his brother, Neil, on a rural farm that Percy inherited from his father. Norm's family was working class, and both his parents had jobs as teachers. His deep love for his family and upbringing made him develop an earnest respect for elderly people and the unique wisdom and perspective they brought to any conversation. Norm was also an incredibly well-read and intelligent student when he was in school. He started high school at Quebec High School, but transferred to Gloucester High School upon his family moving to Ottawa, where he would graduate at just 14 years old. Then at 16 years old, he went to Carleton University to study math, but didn't care for it, so he dropped out. Norm always loved comedy, and even shares a story about a joke that he saw David Letterman perform that he told all of his friends when he was a kid. He worked a bunch of different jobs, but then at 26 years old, he tried stand-up comedy for the first time at Yuck Yuck's Comedy Club. Howard Wagman managed the club and told a story about Norm fleeing after his first set because he felt embarrassed at how the performance went. But thankfully for all of us, Howard talked him into continuing to do stand-up and that he had a unique talent for it. Shortly thereafter, Norm became a regular at Yuck Yuck's and became very good very fast. Within just 6 months, Norm was granted the opportunity to perform at Just for Laughs Comedy Festival in Montreal in 1986. For some comedians, it takes 5 to 10 years to get an opportunity like this, but Norm was doing it within his first year of stand-up comedy. Unreal talent. Norm did so well that the Montreal Gazette wrote an article about him, but this article also detailed Norm's first encounter with cancer, which forced him to take an entire year off stand-up comedy. Norm never talked about this in his act, though, because he figured people would think he was lying. Norm continued doing stand-up and eventually got some excellent opportunities to make a name for himself, like appearing on Star Search and making his television debut on Late Night with David Letterman on May 9th, 1990. Letterman really liked Norm. In fact, he would have Norm on many more times after this, and he went on the record to say that they would have had Norm on weekly if they could have. Later in the year, Norm's father, Percy, passed away, but it didn't slow him down because less than a year after this, Norm would shoot his first comedy special on HBO, One Night Stand. As Norm continued to gain notoriety, he would eventually cross paths with comedian Dennis Miller, and Dennis would hire him as a writer for the one and only season of The Dennis Miller Show in 1992. Following this, in the same year, Roseanne would hire him to write for her sitcom, Roseanne. Then in 1993, Norm received the comedy opportunity of a lifetime and joined Saturday Night Live as a cast member where he would stay until 1997. This job was a lifelong dream for Norm, and he certainly made an impact with his memorable impressions of Burt Reynolds, Larry King, David Letterman, and Senator Bob Dole, as well as being arguably the best host of Weekend Update in SNL history. People loved the indifference Norm had when reading jokes on Weekend Update, especially towards his biggest target, O.J. Simpson. While working on SNL, Norm would get to meet Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, and the rest of the bad boys of SNL. These connections led to Norm landing a movie role in Billy Madison with Adam Sandler in 1995, and a year later he did another movie called The People vs. Larry Flynt with Woody Harrelson in 1996. Then in 1997, Norm made headlines for doing a corporate clean comedy show at Iowa University with Daryl Hammond and Jim Brewer, where he was intentionally filthy and walked 80% of the audience when he was told to be TV clean. Pretty fucked up, but also pretty funny. Also in 1997, we got to see Norm host the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where he had one of the most interesting audiences of all time, and he still crushed. Furthermore, Norm would be fired from Saturday Night Live in 1998, and when asked about it on Letterman and the Howard Stern Show, he stated that it was done by Don Ohlmeyer because Don was good friends with O.J. Simpson, and he really wanted him to stop the O.J. Simpson jokes. This was a cover story, though. In reality, Norm's friend and head writer Jim Downey was being fired, and when the producers asked about the decision, Norm stood in solidarity with Jim and said he would quit if Jim was fired, and that's exactly what happened. But Norm took this secret to the grave. Just a few months after Norm was fired, he would be selected as the host for the 6th annual ESPY Awards, where he would make one of the most infamous O.J. jokes of his career.
He became the first defensive player to win the Heisman Trophy. And congratulations, Charles. That is something that no one can ever take away from you. Unless you kill your wife and a waiter, in which case...
Fucking legendary. Preceding his exit from Saturday Night Live, in 1998, Norm would star in his very own movie directed by Bob Saget titled Dirty Work, which has since become a cult classic amongst Norm Macdonald fans. He would also be a voice actor in Eddie Murphy's Doolittle in 1998. Then in 1999, Norm would be given his very own sitcom titled The Norm Show, where he played Norm for 3 seasons. Also in 1999, NBC would realize their colossal fuck-up in firing Norm, so they invited him back to host Saturday Night Live, to which he proceeded to give a hilarious hilarious monologue trashing the show and calling it horrible in typical Norm Macdonald fashion. Then the next year in 2000, we had this legendary moment of Norm promoting his show on The View, where he called Bill Clinton a murderer on national television. We also got to see Norm host the 27th American Music Awards that year, and we even got to see Norm on the game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where he ended up winning and showing everybody just how smart he really was. Also in 2001, we got to see Norm voice acting as Death in Family Guy, and also star in the movie Screwed with comedy legend Dave Chappelle. Then a year later, in May 2001, The Norm Show would be canceled, making it the worst tragedy to ever happen in the year 2001. Also this year, Norm would voice act in Eddie Murphy's Dolittle 2. Over the next several years, Norm would have a few television projects that would unfortunately perish very quickly, like the TV show A Minute with Stan Hooper that aired on Fox, where Norm was the main character, which would be canceled after only 6 episodes. Then in 2005, Norm was cast in a sketch show titled Back to Norm on Comedy Central, which once again was killed in its infancy because of lackluster ratings and low viewership. However, in the same year, Norm would land an iconic voice acting role as Norm the Genie in the kids' TV show The Fairly Odd Parents. Then just 1 year later, in 2006, Norm would release a sketch comedy album titled Ridiculous, which was met with mixed reviews from his base of avid supporters. It seems like Norm's best luck in this decade was anything that was far away from sketch comedy. Norm would continue to do stand-up while also snagging some acting roles, such as 2007 when he played Chubby's son in the TV show My Name is Earl, and also a TV appearance on the show Match Game where he's part of the celebrity panel. In the meantime, Norm also did some commercials in this time frame, like from 2006 to 2008, he voice acted for the Canadian company Bell Mobility, in addition to being the gingerbread man in AT&T commercials from 2007 to 2008. Then in 2008, we saw Norm do the legendary roast of Bob Saget, where he took the roast about as seriously as you would take fitness and diet advice from Lizzo. Following this, in 2009, Norm pitched a reality show about himself to Fox, but the series would be scrapped halfway through the filming process. Norm would also be featured as a regular guest on late-night talk shows, proving to be one of the most consistently funny guests of all time. It's impossible to track all the best ones, but I promise you they're not difficult to find. Moving on, 2011 would prove to be a really good year for Norm, beginning with the release of his first hour-long stand-up comedy special titled Me Doing Stand-Up, which was met with high praise from comedy fans, and then Norm would star in his own talk show called The Sports Show with Norm Macdonald. Then a few more years passed by, and in 2013, Norm started his very own podcast called Norm Macdonald Live with some fucking douchebag named Adam Egget as his co-host. The show featured many different guests and stayed on YouTube for 3 long seasons. Then in 2014, we got this legendary appearance from Norm where he hosted YouTube's Big Live Comedy Show alongside Jenny Slate and Kasim G, where he rightfully made a mockery out of the entire event. Then in 2014, we got to see Norm do some voice acting as the Pigeon on Mike Tyson Pigeon Mysteries. Later on, 2015 would prove to be a huge year for Norm, where he did some voice acting in the Canadian TV show Sunnyside, where he played a talking manhole. He was a judge on the NBC show Last Comic Standing, and most notably, he did the last late-night stand-up set on Late Show with David Letterman, where he broke down into tears given the sheer gravity of the moment. We also saw Norm as Colonel Sanders in KFC commercials for a bit. Then a year later in 2016, we saw Norm release his incredibly funny book titled Based on a True Story, Memoir. And on top of that, we saw him host the 2016 Canadian Screen Awards, where he showed a lot more reverence and respect than previous hosting occurrences. Then in 2017, we got to hear Norm voice acting as Yaphet, the talking blob, in Seth MacFarlane's TV show The Orville, and then we saw the release of Norm's second hour-long stand-up comedy special titled Hitler's Dog, Gossip and Trickery. Then in 2018, Norm was embroiled in controversy for publicly criticizing aspects of the Me Too movement, and this led to him having an appearance on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon canceled. The most disappointing thing about this is that if this bullshit didn't happen, we probably would have gotten a few more late-night appearances from Norm. Also in 2018, we saw Netflix purchase the rights to Norm Macdonald Live and then rebranded it as Norm Macdonald Has a Show, which a lot of people said was not as good as the original series back when it was on YouTube. Norm would continue doing stand-up for many more years. Then in March of 2020, right before the lockdown started, we got to see a set from Norm at the Hollywood Improv posted on his very own YouTube channel where he talks about the big cough. Little did the people know this would be the last time Norm Macdonald would ever perform stand-up comedy. Then a year later, in 2021, 4 years ago today, Norm Macdonald would die from cancer. His audience in the world of comedy were shocked to know that this was not a new development. Rather, he had been diagnosed with cancer over a decade ago and privately dealt with it until he lost his battle with cancer. Well, I guess it was more of a draw, really. But seriously, Norm Macdonald to a lot of people was a great comedian. If you ask some people, including myself, he was the greatest comedian to ever live. I love Norm Macdonald. He inspired me in many ways, and if you've made it this far, you probably love him too. Every year in September December on this channel, I post a video to commemorate Norm and his comedy legacy, and I hope you guys appreciated this one. If you did, make sure to leave me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a comment with your favorite Norm Macdonald moment of all time, and if you want more content about Norm Macdonald to watch right now, click the link on your screen here to watch this video about the time Norm Macdonald was kicked out of Iowa by the governor for being dirty at a corporate clean comedy show. I know you guys are going to love it. Anyway, take care and God bless.